Addiction is one of the most misunderstood psychological phenomena. Most people think addiction is about the substance or behavior itself, but the truth is far more complex. Addiction isn't really about what you're addicted to. It's about the patterns underneath. It's about how your brain and psychology get wired in a certain way. And understanding these patterns is the first step toward recognizing addiction in yourself or others, and ultimately toward recovery. So what exactly is addiction? Addiction is a compulsive pattern of behavior that continues despite negative consequences. It's not just liking something a lot. It's not just using something frequently. Real addiction means you've lost control over the behavior. You continue it even though it's harming you, and stopping feels almost impossible. But why does this happen? Why do some people develop addictions while others don't? The answer lies in understanding the core patterns that underlie all addiction. The first pattern is the reward cycle. Your brain is designed to seek rewards. When you do something that feels good, your brain releases dopamine, a chemical that signals satisfaction and reinforces the behavior. This is healthy and normal, but addiction hijacks this system. When someone uses an addictive substance or engages in an addictive behavior, the dopamine spike is often much larger than what naturally rewarding activities produce. Over time, the brain adapts to these massive dopamine floods by reducing its sensitivity. This is called tolerance. You need more of the substance or behavior to get the same effect. But here's the crucial part. The brain also starts to anticipate and crave the reward before you even use. The craving becomes as powerful as the actual experience. The reward cycle becomes a trap. The second pattern is escapism and avoidance. Most addictions start as a solution to something uncomfortable. Someone drinks to escape anxiety. Someone gambles to escape boredom or financial stress. Someone uses social media to avoid loneliness or difficult emotions. The addictive behavior works temporarily. It does provide relief, but it's only masking the underlying problem. The anxiety is still there. The boredom is still there. The loneliness is still there. So the person has to keep using to keep escaping. And over time, the escape becomes the primary motivation, not the pleasure. The addiction becomes a coping mechanism for emotional pain. The third pattern is the reinforcement of negative beliefs. Addiction often reinforces a distorted self-image. Someone might start using because they believe they're not good enough, not worthy of connection, or incapable of handling life's challenges. The addiction seems to prove these beliefs true. They fail at work, they damage relationships, they lose control. These failures then reinforce the original negative beliefs, which makes them want to escape more, which leads to more addiction. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. The person's identity becomes wrapped up in being an addict. Breaking the addiction means challenging this entire belief system about who they are. The fourth pattern is the cycle of shame and secrecy. Addiction thrives in darkness. People hide their addictive behavior because they're ashamed. This secrecy becomes part of the addiction itself. The double life, the lying, the hiding, these all create additional stress and shame that needs to be escaped. So the addiction gets worse. The shame intensifies. The secrecy deepens. And the person feels increasingly isolated and trapped. The shame becomes inseparable from the addiction. Many people will continue an addiction they hate, simply because they're too ashamed to ask for help or admit the truth. The fifth pattern is the loss of alternative coping mechanisms. Before addiction develops, a person typically has other ways of dealing with stress or difficult emotions. They exercise, they talk to friends, they have hobbies, they engage in their community. But as the addiction deepens, these alternative coping mechanisms fall away. The addictive behavior becomes the only way they know how to handle discomfort. Their brain literally forgets other options. So if they try to quit the addiction, they're left without any way to manage the emotions underneath. The withdrawal from the emotion is often worse than the withdrawal from the substance. This is why so many people relapse. The sixth pattern is the progression and escalation. Addiction rarely stays static. It gets worse over time. Early on, someone might use occasionally and feel in control. But the brain's adaptation to dopamine, the tolerance that builds, means they need more. They also tend to escalate the risky behavior. Someone might start smoking casually, then daily, then heavily. Someone might start with social gambling, then move to problem gambling with higher stakes. Someone might start checking social media a few times a day, then hourly, then obsessively. The brain becomes increasingly dependent on the behavior to feel normal. Without it, there's anxiety, irritability, and profound dissatisfaction. This escalation makes it harder to quit because the stakes have become much higher. The seventh pattern is the trauma connection. While not all addiction stems from trauma, there's a strong relationship. People who have experienced trauma, abuse, neglect, or significant loss are more vulnerable to addiction. This is because trauma leaves wounds that hurt intensely. The addictive substance or behavior provides powerful numbing. For trauma survivors, the addiction often makes psychological sense. It's solving a real problem, even if the solution is ultimately destructive. Understanding this is crucial, because it means that simply removing the addiction without addressing the underlying trauma rarely leads to lasting recovery. The eighth pattern is social and relational consequences. Addiction doesn't happen in isolation. It damages relationships. Partners feel neglected or betrayed. Children suffer from parental absence or unpredictability. Friends are hurt by broken promises or manipulation. Coworkers deal with unreliability. These relational consequences then create more shame and isolation, which drives more addiction. The person loses their support system at precisely the moment they need it most. The addiction becomes both cause and consequence of profound disconnection. Now here's what's important to understand. These patterns aren't character flaws. They're not moral failings. They're psychological mechanisms that anyone's brain could get caught in under the right circumstances. Addiction is a disease of the brain's reward system, the emotional regulation system, and the decision-making system. It's real, it's powerful, and it's not something someone can simply think their way out of or willpower through. But understanding these patterns is valuable because it shows that addiction is treatable. Each pattern can be interrupted. The reward cycle can be rebalanced. The underlying emotions can be processed. New coping mechanisms can be learned. Shame can be replaced with compassion. Alternative activities can restore meaning. Recovery from addiction requires addressing all of these patterns simultaneously. It requires cognitive work to challenge the distorted beliefs. It requires emotional work to process the pain underneath. It requires behavioral work to build new habits and coping mechanisms. It requires relational work to rebuild trust and connection. And it often requires professional support because the patterns are deeply embedded. The brain has learned these patterns so thoroughly that going it alone is incredibly difficult. The most hopeful thing about understanding addiction patterns is this: patterns can be rewritten. The brain is plastic. It can form new pathways. Someone who's been addicted can learn to find genuine pleasure in healthy activities again. They can develop emotional resilience. They can rebuild relationships. They can create a life worth living that doesn't require escape. The addictive patterns aren't permanent. They're learned, and what's learned can be unlearned. But it takes time, support, and commitment. It takes understanding not just that someone is addicted, but why. It takes compassion for the pain that the addiction was trying to solve. And it takes belief that change is possible.